everybody. Welcome to another episode of Video Marketing Success Stories. I'm your host, Andy Glickman, along with CEO and founder of RIP Media Group, Mr. Maury Rogow.
Hey, Maury, there, Andy. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on here. I love it.
Love having you, and hope everybody's doing well and can hear me well with my new microphone. my high quality, so I don't have to shout into a microphone 2.5 feet away. I've stepped up into the high-tech world. And speaking of stepping up into the high-tech world, how about that for a segue? We like to talk about projects in the video marketing world, and particularly some RIP Media Group projects, past and present, and get Maury's take on them and how they all went down, came about, pitfalls, successes, etc. And one that both of us have gravitated to in the past, and we just love the look, and it's always interesting stories to talk about that 3D animation world. And in particular, there's a series of projects actually you guys have worked on recently for iTrade. And I'd love for you to, if you don't mind, explain to the people at home who iTrade is and what they do.
Yeah.
And then tell us, first of all, that, and then also tell us how they even came into the RIP Media world.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this project did not start off as a 3D project at all. It started off with the customer found us through, looking around for a good animation and actually video production partner, because they were thinking they were going to do a live action shoot. So it started off with a phone call based on them doing a search and finding us on a couple of review sites. And they said that they saw some really great reviews on us and, some different commentary and things like that. And I never did find out where they, where customers are talking about us out there, but I love it that they are. And obviously gave us some good marks. So got the phone call and they said they wanted to do a live action shoot. They are a company that, touches, if they touch basically everything you do when you eat. And everybody eats. So, this company is one of the largest out there. Never heard of them. I'd never heard of them. You may not have either, but really when you think about produce and you think
That's just because we don't eat.
You don't eat. So all of you out there that don't eat food or consume, then yes, you wouldn't really have touched these folks, or they touch you. But anybody that does eat, and especially produce, fresh vegetables, organic, non-organic, that kind of stuff, you have been kind of a part of their network. And so their network is, thousands of farmers, distributors, the truckers, the transportation folks, the stores, Sprouts and Whole Foods and Pavilions and Kroger and all this kind of stuff. And so they are the tracking mechanism. They're the tracking and logistics mechanism from farm to your fork. So from farm to fork. So really, really cool stuff. That little tiny barcode that you see on different things, that comes from them. So, they do have a couple competitors out there, but I know that they, they're a late entrant into this game, and they came in with really high tech solutions. So they just made huge, huge gains in the past, 5 or 6 years. So that's what they do. So they track food and logistics farm to fork. And I thought that was a really cool thing. It's software and it affects us all the time. So I started getting this vision of, well, what if we could follow the strawberry? Let's make this really visual. Let's follow the strawberry from being pulled off the vine and going through its whole process, so it goes, the guy picks it and then, hands it off. Maybe it's the woman that's in charge of the transportation, goes to the truck, goes to the airplane, goes to the boat, goes to the sorting, factory, decides where it goes. It's going to go to Sprouts, and that kind of thing.
So as you create this greater world in your head, is that pretty much where you went, okay, live action, not so much. They're not going to be shooting a strawberry going all across the country. So let me come at them with.
Yeah. So, well, I'll tell you what, I started off with what they wanted, which is to do exactly that, to go out and film it. But when we started putting the, the logistics, put the logistics together, you're talking multiple locations. You're going to shipping yards. I mean, to really get this without going to, stock footage, right? Which can really diminish a project. And they had, I guess the other big thing here is they had a big celebrity as their voiceover artist. So they already had the narration done and their script already done, which is very unusual for us, but they already had it done. And they really wanted the visuals to pop to match this amazing voice that they had. So we said, all right, we can put this together and it's going to be, 2 months, 3 months. And then we have logistics and travel and this and can we get rights to be on the ship? Can we follow it? And all these kind of things. And then I said, maybe we could just do this in animation, but we can keep it at a really high level if we go with 3D animation? And I sent some samples to them, and luckily and happily, they said, that's a great idea. Yeah, we could do this in animation, and we could do so much more, because it's animated. So that's the route we went. And so we were talking 2D animation, then we really kind of pushed for 3D because it's just such a beautiful play, and it'll be such a eye-catching video. So they did go for the 3D, and we created characters. Obviously, we have to create the character, then you have to rig the character, which is sort of put a skeleton inside the character so it moves, the characters move like humans and so on, and then created all the background scenes, created all the the storyboards, the animatic, and so on and so on. So really went well.
Neat. Now talk for a second, if you will, about the difference between 3D and 2D. I mean, some things are obvious. Some things are logistical. Some things are based on expense and cost and budget. Right. I guess part of the question is, how do you make that leap from 3D to 2D just in your own mind? I'm sorry, from 2D to 3D in your own mind, that 2D is just not good enough in a certain sense, or not enough.
Right.
3D would be so much better in spite of all the extra effort.
Right. So that's great. So I'll slow down a little bit and try not to answer this thing just in a too basic way. So first thing to think about truly is budget. Is there an appetite for having something that's truly cinematic? And when I say cinematic, I really mean it. If you think about cinema, you think about movies, you have a camera. And typically in today's movies, there's not like a camera locked off and just watching people like they're in a play. The camera follows people through, down the hall, out to the street, into the car. You can, steady cams, you have, cranes, you have helicopters, you have all these different looks, views, angles to really understand a scene. Let's say you're going into Boston, you hover over Boston, maybe you land at the airport, but you want to come in on the plane. So all those things are really cinematic. And, you have multiple camera angles and moving camera. When you have that, you're really in a world of the real world. And that really starts to lean towards 3D. And that also leans towards budget. So the budget's going to be about, typically about 3 times higher with a 3D project than 2D. And it's because things are not just, from 2 to 3. It's not like 1 digit higher. It's exponentially harder to do a lot of things in 3D. But the payoff is really worth it because it's so visually beautiful and, and really engaging. So, budget's the first thing. So, think about whatever a 2D project would be. Again, you could probably multiply by 3 or more. Again, you get to Pixar level and DreamWorks, they're at $1 million a minute for those movies, right? You get a 2-hour movie, that's $120 million that they put into it. And sure they did, right? It's gorgeous. You see How to Train Your Dragon, or, or WALL-E, or, Frozen, that kind of thing. So much goes in there. So budget is a big consideration. In our world, we're not hitting $1 million a minute, but certainly at 20, 30, $40,000 a minute certainly is reasonable. Okay, so for 3D, for really good 3D animation, though. So backing down to what's the look? We talked about the world, and then you have the cameras. So what you do with the 3D project, similar to 2D, is you create the story first. Everything is built on the script, the story, and the visuals, right? What do I want to be seeing as I'm hearing this? How am I progressing forward through this story and keeping people engaged? So, you start with the script, you go to some art samples, and then you move to storyboards. And this is where it differs. In the storyboard area, if you're going to go 2D, you're in a flat world. You can do some trickery. You can zoom in, you can zoom through scenes. You can move left, right. You can do a couple things with some angles. We call it 2.5D. So you can do maybe a character turns, you see a profile, 45-degree angle, that kind of thing. In the 3D world, everything is created as a 3D model. So you can actually take a camera and zoom around. You can fly through the space. I can see somebody, let's say that 2 people are talking. I can have the camera do a complete 360 revolve on them, and I get every angle, from, every literal, from 0 degree to 1 degree to 2 degree, the whole thing. They have nose, shapes, shadows, lighting, that changes. Where's the sun in the sky? Where's the light? What's in the background? So you have this movement the entire way around. So you have the camera that's completely, unanchored to anything. It's, you have steady cam, you have helicopter cam, you have the camera anywhere that you want it to be, from any angle.
So as you're going through the storyboard for the iTrade video, like we'll say the first one, you really have to map out every scene, every shot to be 3D. I mean, are you that deep into it, or do you kind of go, we'll go 2D for this part, and then let's find an area that we can do cool 3D with, and then we'll kick back into this 360 panorama silliness.
Awesomeness.
Silliness.
Yeah. So that's a great question. So in the storyboard for 3D, you want to get as detailed as possible. I mean, you don't get frame by frame, but you certainly want the intro to the scene, and the outro transition to the next scene. So you need at least 3 for each key point, if not a lot more. A lot of times if you're really getting into, scenes where the dialogue is incredibly important, you will actually do, every couple of seconds, what's the movement, what's the over the shoulder shot, et cetera, all the camera layout. For this, we actually go a little bit lighter than that. We don't do second to second, but we certainly do, as I mentioned, probably 3 boards per scene, but we add an extra element to it, which is we take the storyboard and then we create what we call an animatic. And the animatic is a moving storyboard. So we have a little, some basics, maybe some parallax effect. We have, the first compositions or pre-visualizations of the characters doing some basic movement. It's not fully colored, it's not lit yet, but we have all these things and we have the sound going at the same time. So now we can tell if the timing works. Do I need more here? Do I want to actually add, more movement? Do I want to add a couple of extra camera angles and so forth? And that really comes alive in the animatic portion of the production process. So I think that'll help you out. Where again, when you were talking about working slides in 2D in here or there, you really kind of go into a project knowing that. So if you're in a 3D world, you're probably going to stay in the 3D world because it can be a little bit jarring to go from 3D to 2D. But if we know, let's say that, we have customers that are limited by budget and they say, we would love a splash of 3D. We'd like, some really magic moments of 3D. Then we can actually really work it out. So we have a good, basically want to start off with some magic in 3D, move to some 2D subtly, to keep that budget down, and then ramp up again with some 3D magic moments throughout. So you really got to know what you're working with when you go in and you start creating the storyboard.
So would you say that it takes a greater understanding of the story as a whole to pull off 3D than 2D animation? Because if you're really diving into the details about what you want to create 3D around, you got to know that story inside and out and backwards and forwards.
If you could change that from a question to a statement, it's done.
Then I've answered it myself.
You answered it yourself. There it is.
This Rogow guy. I'm in charge now.
Here. Why am I on this podcast?
I'm telling you, people, we need to know the story.
It's all about knowing the story. And then it's very difficult. This is why you need really fantastic art directors. What's an art director? Some people are like, what does that even mean? What's a creative director? What's the animation producer? When you look at the end of these movies that go by and you see 8,000 people worked on Frozen or Moana or whatever, well, you can start to understand why. But if you look in the commercial world, the art director is the person that's going to really piece together with the creative director and with the director, right? As well as the animator and all these other pieces. But you need somebody that has that design brain. So you have to understand every element of the story and you have to visualize it. So it's not, somebody's going to walk in the room and say, hey, I need a little bit of help with this. So the art director knowing what's happening around them visually in their mind, and then they put it down on paper. So they're going to work with either themselves or a storyboard artist to put down what the story is saying, what moves them forward. And it's always about getting people to ask themselves, hey, what happens next? What happens next?
And speaking of what happens next, then when you get into the animation process, for example, for this iTrade, I should say these iTrade videos, because it's a series of them. So not only are you taxing yourself on one, but what the heck, let's do 3, 4 of these and just really kill ourselves. But when you get into the animation, you have your art director, creative director kind of map everything out. Is it a team of animators? Are you just like but are you tasking 3 or 4 people to do it? Are you tasking one? Because there's an incredible sameness to the look.
Mhm.
So is that just is that a team rolling together, or is that just one guy sitting in his basement going nuts?
So you can, that's funny. So we've done that with the one guy sitting in his basement going nuts, or in our office going nuts. It depends on the timeline. So, again, the bigger the project, the more people you're going to have. So the more your workflow system, your pipeline, in a sense, is what they call it, really, really matters. And that you have, constant review meetings so that multiple artists that are working on this all have the same look, design, feel, movement, etc. So you have, artists and animators all working together, but we typically do it in segments. So let me go back to what we were talking about, which is iTrade. So with iTrade, they actually started off with one, and then we did a series. So they liked that one so much, and it worked so well that we actually decided, or they decided to, let's pursue doing, 4 of these. 4 more of these for different product areas. So when you do that, we wanted to do something where we wanted to alter the look just a little bit, expand the story and expand the world, and have them relate to each other. So we had characters that were in the same, that carried through from story to story, and we watched them progress through their lives. So it's really cool. And so what happens there is, they called us back, and you'll probably ask at some point, were there any concerns? And one of them was, once the CEO, I believe, said, "Hey, this is looking good. I want them now." Somebody in the organization said, "How fast can we get them?" Not, realistically, not tomorrow, but instead of, 8 weeks, can we do it in 3? And, the answer is we can, but here's what happens. The budget has to go up. There's not a way to really speed 3D, to that kind of timeline. You have things just technically. Render times on 3D is so much higher and more intense than a 2D project, or even just a regular old movie that you're creating. I think I mentioned this before. At the beginning of the movie Hugo, that Martin Scorsese directed, had his 3D animation at the beginning. I think it was the opening 3 or 4 minutes. Took 3 months to render. 3 months to pull that whole thing together. And that's how detailed it is, because it's absolutely gorgeous. So, these things can take a long time. So looking at that, looking at the scope, and what we did is we said, we can do it, but we really like for projects to be able to breathe a little bit. You take a look at it, you let it sit over the weekend, you come back Monday morning, new ideas occur to you that you want to have inside. And when you, give it a night of breathing room or a couple of days, you'll actually get little extra magic moments that you want to have inside. And when you're in a rush, you really don't get those as often. So we really don't want to push it too hard on the timeline. But we can speed, and we, some companies would be 12 to 16 weeks. We can do it in about half that time and still give it some of the great breathing room.
It kind of brings up a general question. I mean, obviously, I'm sure you get this with 3D projects, but sometimes the client just doesn't understand the process or elements of the process that are either time intensive or cost intensive. Yeah. And I would imagine with 3D, that's especially true. I mean, how do you address those questions when somebody says, "Why isn't this done tomorrow or yesterday?" when you have all these layers that you're still creating?
Well, in the future, I'm just going to point them to this podcast.
Okay, fair enough.
No, but it's great, and I think it's I think one of the things that I've learned over the years is knowledge is power, right? So, in enabling our customers to understand what the real workflow is and the challenges there. I mean, it's difficult. Yes, I mean, this is a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company and growing very fast. Are they going to sit down and listen to a whole 3D pipeline conversation? No, but maybe a quick comparison of, here are the steps, and we really can't shortcut it, and compare it to something just like in stories. Compare it to something they can relate to or understand. Then it makes sense. They develop software. Well, you can't just say, "You know what, I need that new version out next week," when it takes 3 months. There's thousands of lines of code. There's this and that testing and all that kind of thing. So relating it to that, or relating it to literally, shipping the strawberry across the globe, it doesn't happen in 2 hours. There's the time of travel. So that's what we've done. We've kind of explained the process, and we can show it. So there's a couple examples I show. I use the Ben and Jerry's project as an example, and I talk about each step in the process. And now we're probably going to be using this as one of the examples, since this is now a favorite of my whole team, working on this. And that's, we'll share it here. I think we should show the storyboard,
Right.
and then the animatic, and then the animatic to previs, and then, previs to, first drafts. And then we can, move on and show the final. And you can see how much detail and how much things evolve from step to step to step. So when we explained that, and it didn't take very much, when we explained that, the answer was fine. Let's get it right. Let's get it with quality instead of just getting it with speed.
Now, were there any specific concerns raised throughout the process, or not, I should say beyond the process, when they start to see what you're producing, they start to see the animatic, they start to see visual renderings and specifics? I mean, obviously, of course, there was great love. How, why wouldn't there be? But were there other concerns or questions raised?
Like I said, the speed was the first one. What else was? I got to tell you, on this project, there weren't many. I honestly, I think that by the way, they even have an in-house producer, that does all their other videos, that was working with us as our main point of contact. And he really understood, what it takes to put all this together. So that was a huge help, and is a huge help and benefit. So there weren't a lot that we saw. And again, perhaps he was taking those questions and answering them internally. But for us, really, we got just so much positive feedback, certainly suggestions here or there. Could we have this character, do this? Could we bring up this messaging point? Can you do a little thing here or there? But they really loved the direction that we were taking this, and we had a lot of creative freedom and that they were open to. So it really makes this series, better and better with each one that we come out with. So I can't really talk about too many concerns.
Great. No, that's great, and for such an extensive project, that's great to hear. Are we talking some award possibilities? You're going to submit this thing for some considerations?
It's a great question. I would like to. We haven't gotten to that conversation with the customer too deeply. There's a couple of things that are next steps with the customer that I think are going to be, this will be award worthy. And I believe what we're going to do is we're going to mix these videos into the other product that I've come up with, the video bot, which personalizes the video and makes them interactive videos. So that instead of just having a general message, we're actually going to have it targeted to different people. So you, Andy, will get a message or a video with your name in it, maybe even a character that looks like you in it.
That's scary.
If you're in California, it's scary. Hey, we can make it whatever we want. We'll make it beautiful.
How did I lose so much weight in my caricature?
We've based you on the Terminator and for physique. So, so we're going to make them personalized and interactive. And I think that they're going to move forward with that. Hopefully by the time this comes out, that'll be happening. And I think those would definitely be award worthy, and we'll want to submit them to some of the industry awards and advertising.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Look forward to it. Well, these iTrade videos, the ones that you've already produced, are a great piece, obviously for iTrade, and great samples, I'm sure, for Rip Media Group. And I think the takeaway, if I can kind of encapsulate what we've talked about as it relates to 3D animation projects, is that prepare for a lot of detail from both perspectives, as the company and as the client, and just know the story inside and out to be able to have all elements come together. So great. Well, Maury, I would like to thank you once again for your valuable input. Your great stories. It helps our listeners and viewers a lot. For Video Marketing Success Stories, I'm Andy Glickman, saying thank you very much. Thank you to Maury Rogow.
Thank you.
Rip Media CEO and founder. If you have any questions about what they do, feel free to visit them at ripmediagroup.com. Send Maury a note, and he can answer any questions that you might have about your video marketing needs. Thank you all once again for joining. We will see you next week. Take care.
Bye-bye.